working to connect a region of over 600 cultural bridges between our lands.
Hello and welcome to ASEAN in Focus. I'm Alma Angeles and thank you for joining us today on today's headlines. President Marcos Jr. attended his first flag-raising ceremony in Malacanang, saying he wanted to start things right and promised to have a very good working relationship with the palace employees. Vice President Sara Duterte assured that improving the country's basic education will be prioritized under her term as the Department of Education Secretary. Chinese State Councilor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi is scheduled to visit the Philippines today and the 6th upon the invitation of Foreign Affairs Secretary Enrique Manalo. And residents living near Mount Canlaon should avoid getting near the 4-kilometer permanent danger zone as the volcano is now showing increased activity with possible phreatic eruptions. First in our news, here in the country, President Marcos Jr. attended his first flag-raising ceremony in Malacanang Monday, saying he wanted to start things right and promised to have a very good working relationship with the employees of the palace. The Philippine president also told the palace workers that he doesn't consider them as employees, but as partners in his work in Malacanang. Take a look.
Ito pala, first Monday nga pala, sabi niya, meron tayong flag raising. So, I made sure na makapunta ako para naman mag-start tayo. We start out on the right foot. I know how hard that you work at ginagawa ninyo para bilang serbisyo at hindi kayo namimili kung hindi kayo ay sumusunod kung sino man ang naipili ng ating mga mamamayan na umupo dito sa palasyong ito. Kaya sana naman ito'y simula ng isang napakagandang working relationship sa atin. We consider you, hindi kayo ang empleyado namin. You are our partners. Hindi namin magagawa yung gagawin namin kung hindi sa inyo. I am very, very happy to have attended today's flag ceremony, to at least be with you a little bit and to start to know kung who is occupying the offices around in the palace, and to know that the passion and enthusiasm that we saw in the campaign remains, especially with the Malacanang staff, at napaka-importante na yan. Yung multiplier effect ng trabaho ninyo ay baka hindi ninyo alam. Pero yung trabaho when you sit at your desk and you do something and you make a decision or you push something or you expedite something that affects not only you, not only me, that affects millions of people. Kaya napaka-importante na itama natin yung aking gagawin trabaho. So, I think medyo redundant na siguro yan because kaya kayo nandito dahil nauunawaan ninyo kung gaano kahalaga ang inyong ginagawa. Kaya sasabihin ko na lang, maraming salamat. I hope I meet all of you individually at some point. I'm sure I will. That way, mapagtibay natin ang ating working relationship. Thank you very much for very, very kind reception. Parang ang pakiramdam ko, I really am in friendly territory. Maraming salamat. Magandang umaga sa inyo.
President Marcos said that despite challenges, he assured the palace workers that they would not be neglected. The president grew up inside Malacanang. It was his family's home for about 2 decades during his father's 20-year rule, from the time that he was just 8 years old up to the time that they were forced into exile in 1986 when he was 28 years old. Meanwhile, President Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr., also concurrent Secretary of the Department of Agriculture, insisted that the department has to move quickly and ensure an adequate supply of rice and corn for the third and fourth quarters of the year. During the executive meeting, the president said Filipino families must be provided with sufficient and affordable food. Let's listen in.
Well, very simple, as I was beginning to say. We have to attend to the impending food crisis that it seems it will be visiting us in the next 2 quarters. And when we look around the world, everyone is preparing for it. And therefore because we are already in a disadvantageous position in terms of supply, food supply, we're already in a disadvantageous position. We should really pay a very close attention to what we can do. I think what we have, the conclusions we have come to here are that we have to increase our production, and we've talked a little bit about the ways that we can do it. We can increase our production of rice and corn at least, and hopefully I don't know if we have enough time. Pati sa problema ng livestock, ng baboy at saka manok. We'll see. We have to think very hard about making sure that people have sufficient food, number one, at the price that they can afford. Because again, it's useless to have food if they cannot afford it anyway. The other side of it is on the longer term, we need to come up with a multi-year plan, really, to reconstruct our value chain. And that, for me, is the most important thing. Because pag nagawa na yan, these are starters. Masagana 150, masagana 200. These are good plans that we have to put into place. Let's operationalize them already. Itong pinag-usapan natin, first on the immediate short-term supply for the rest of the country. Sabihan nyo, you have, if there are EOs that you might need, legislation that you might need, you draft them already and you give them to us. And we'll see kung ano yung gagamitin natin doon. On the longer term, we really have to reconstruct, as I said, our value chain, starting from our scientists and our researchers all the way to the Kadiwa store. So we have to remake that model. We have a good model that was from the previous administration, but it's a very different world out there. The technology is very different. And although the concept is still going to be similar, we have to come up with our own 2022 to 2028 to 2030. Do not be hesitant to make it multi-year, because I really don't believe you can do this if you just say 1 year, 3 years, even 6 years, baka kulang. No, we can do it in 6 years. So we can do this in less than 6 years. I'm pretty sure.
Besides securing short-term supplies, President Marcos noted that the department will push for long-term actions, as we heard there. And under the administration of former President Duterte, the DA had its first long-term plan, the National Agriculture and Fisheries Modernization and Industrialization Plan, or NAFMIP, 2021 to 2030, with an annual proposed budget of 250 billion pesos. It is a directional plan which seeks to lead the Philippines to production resilience, food security, and sufficiency. William Dar, the former secretary, said that this is just one of the programs that they see as a solid foundation for the agricultural department. Meanwhile, Australia said it will not be seeking to arm its submarines with nuclear weapons. Its Foreign Minister Penny Wong said following a meeting with Malaysian officials that afternoon, who is Malaysian-born also, currently on a working visit to the Southeast Asian nation that ended last Thursday. Meanwhile, Ms. Wong, in echoing the Foreign Minister of Malaysia, Saifuddin, said that in moving forward, Malaysia and Australia would also work to give greater momentum to the partnership. She said that Australia is also ready to continue to be a wheat and meat supplier to Malaysia, especially at a time when global supply chains have been constrained. Take a look.
Was that Australia continues to be a reliable supplier, for example, of wheat and meat, at a time where global supply chains have been constrained. And obviously, as a comprehensive strategic partner, we will work with Malaysia, if required, on any issues they have in terms of their supply constraints arising out of.
Before arriving in Malaysia, Ms. Wong was in Vietnam. After her appointment as the foreign minister, early this month, she was in Indonesia with Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. Standing in one of his huge wheat fields in Rai Oleksandrivka, Donetsk region, farmer Sergei Lyubarsky wonders how on earth he will manage to harvest his crops. Between the lack of fuel to run his combined harvester and the risk of being bombed, the chances seem so remote. Take a look.
Дай Бог, надо еще прикупить солярки, если дай Бог где-то купим. Цена сильно высокая, 75 гривен за литр. Ну и если война даст нам убрать, чтобы тут не сожгли ничего, вот все пацаны, ну, значит будет хлеб. Вот она начинает обсыпаться, вот мука, вот она показывает, вот, видите, вот она уже начинает, уже больше, чем восковая спелость у нее, уже видите, она уже начинает свое брать. То есть недельки через 2 она уже будет готова к уборке. А обсыпается она просто элементарно, даже вот этого она уже будет сыпаться. Толкнул ее, она уже начинает сыпаться, даже от ветра колышание. Вот такое дело.
Упадут ракеты?
Упадет, сгорит и все. Сгорит, чтоб не сгорело, вот что. Вот это жалко, труды и все. И пшеницу я покупал элиту, самая семенная, чтобы была.
Russian forces on the other side of the hill, about 30 kilometers or 18 miles west of the city of Lugansk. Lyubarsky farms 170 hectares of land, producing mostly wheat, but also barley and sunflowers, grains whose prices have shot up on international markets, especially since Russia's invasion on Ukraine, a key global producer of wheat. But he has been forced to leave 40 hectares fallow. He said he couldn't buy maize seed because the war started, and with the imported seeds taking up to 2 months to arrive. Now the land that's not under cultivation is used in part by the army to store military equipment. Russia's invasion of agricultural power, Ukraine, has severely disrupted the global wheat market, prompting warnings that the conflict could lead to hunger in some countries. Wheat is milled into flour to make a huge range of foods, from bread to pasta to desserts. Everyone eats wheat, but not everyone is capable of producing it, according to Bruno Parmentier, an economist and author of the book Feeding Humanity. Only around a dozen countries produce enough wheat to be able to export it to. China is the world's top producer, but is also a major importer of the commodity to feed its 1.4 billion people. Russia, the United States, Australia, Canada, and Ukraine are the world's top exporters. Egypt, Indonesia, Nigeria, and Turkey are among the top importers. Grain prices were already high before Russia began its invasion of Ukraine in February. There were several factors behind the increases. Energy prices soared as economies bounced back from COVID lockdowns, sending costs for nitrogen-based fertilizers higher. China is not expected to release wheat stocks while India has imposed a temporary ban on its exports after a heat wave hit harvest. President Vladimir Putin denied that Russia bore any responsibility for a looming global food crisis due to the conflict in Ukraine. President Putin instead blamed Western sanctions imposed on Russia. He said that by targeting the owners of fertilizer companies, Western sanctions have created conditions that made it much more difficult to deliver certain products internationally. Top officials from the United States and China held a candid video call on Tuesday to discuss global economic challenges, especially regarding supply chains. The exchange between Chinese Vice Premier Liu He and U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen came as President Biden considers lifting some tariffs on imports from China to try and ease soaring inflation. The world's two biggest economies are also grappling with COVID-snarled supply chains and rising global energy prices. The two sides agree that as the world economy is facing severe challenges, it is of great significance to strengthen macro policy communication and coordination between China and the U.S., according to China's official Xinhua news agency. And jointly maintaining the stability of the global, industrial, and supply chains is in the interest of both countries and the whole world. With inflation in the U.S. at 40-year highs, authorities are rushing to try and find ways to ease price pressures. Among the options is lifting some of the trade tariffs imposed on China by Biden's predecessor, Donald Trump. Any decision is likely to come soon, as some of the Trump duties are set to expire from July 6 unless renewed. Meanwhile, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov will visit Vietnam from July 5th to the 6th at the invitation of Vietnamese counterpart Bui Thanh Son. The visit is made on the occasion of the 10th anniversary of the establishment of Vietnam-Russia Comprehensive Strategic Partnership. According to VGP, the government-run state news agency of Vietnam, Vietnam and Russia established diplomatic ties in 1950. The two nations upgraded their relations into strategic partnership in 2001 and comprehensive strategic partnership in 2012. Both countries adopted a joint statement on 2030 vision for development of the comprehensive strategic partnership between the Russian Federation and Vietnam on the occasion of Vietnamese President Nguyen Xuan Phoc's official visit to Russia from November 29th to December 2 last year. Chinese State Councilor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi is scheduled to visit the Philippines today and the 6th upon the invitation of Foreign Affairs Secretary Enrique A. Manalo. According to the Department of Foreign Affairs, Wang will be the first foreign counterpart to be received by Manalo after assuming office on July 1st. Wang and Manalo are set to have a bilateral meeting where they will discuss a wide range of issues, focusing on maintaining and building on the positive trend of relations between the Philippines and China. Wang visited Manila on January 15 to 16 last year for an official visit upon the invitation of former Foreign Affairs Secretary Teodoro Locsin Jr. Vice President Sara Duterte assured that improving the country's basic education will be prioritized under her term as the Department of Education Secretary. In a joint farewell and welcome ceremony, Vice President Duterte commended former Secretary Leonor Briones for all reforms she initiated in the DepEd. She also said that she takes inspiration from her leadership. Take a look.
While the challenges emanating from the COVID-19 pandemic, Secretary Liling's light shone the brightest as a leader, an educator, and a Filipina who has a deep concern for the education sector and love of country. Secretary Liling and the whole Department of Education organization never cowered in the face of disapproval, public frustration, and pressure. When some sectors called for an academic freeze, the response was academic ease. When you said, education must continue, education must never stop, and as I take the task of being the next Secretary of the Department of Education, I take inspiration from you, but I will also take the task with a reminder that we shall continue to find ways to improve basic education in terms of access, equity, quality, resiliency, and governance. To produce learners who can achieve their full potential as individuals who are responsible, skilled, knowledgeable, productive, and determined to achieve their dreams for themselves and for our country. We look forward to working with you as we take on the task of helping our children become our country's assets. So, I feel sad. Parang namimiss, kahit na hindi kami magkatrabaho, parang namimiss ko si Secretary Briones sa darating ko na trabaho. And I'm truly happy that she committed to stay on as a consultant for the Office of the Secretary of the Department of Education.
Now, to ensure the continuity of programs geared towards achieving quality education, as we heard there, Vice President Duterte announced that she tapped Briones as her consultant. And the news continues here on ASEAN in Focus. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Alam namin ang iyong pagsisikap. Dama namin ang iyong mga sakripisyo. Kita namin ang pagharap mo sa bawat pagsubok. Kaya sa kabila ng mga hamon ng buhay, nandito kami para umalalay. Kasi katulad mo, gusto rin namin ang magandang bukas para sa kanya. Hatid namin ang dekalidad na edukasyon at makabagong pasilidad sa abot kayang halaga. Kaya huwag ka na mangamba. Sasamahan ka namin tuparin ang mga pangarap niya. Maaasahan mong sulit dito ang mga pinagsikapan mo. Sa aming mga makabagong pasilidad at sistema ng edukasyon. Mailalabas natin ang aking talino at mga kakayahan niya. Kahit sa munting halaga, makakasiguro ka na makakasabay siya sa mabilis na pag-ikot ng mundo. Sa New Era, karamay mo kami sa bawat hamon. Kaagapay mo kami sa bawat hakbang. Kasama mo kami sa bawat ngiti at tagumpay.
Wala ba ito na malayo nang matupad ang mga plano ni Elsa?
Pwede bang pakiprint yung thesis ko? Okay na yan. Huwag kang mag-alala, ako bahala. Huwag na huwag mo iwawala, ah. Walang thesis, walang graduation, walang Elsa. I-save mo sa ibang USB ang thesis mo tapos ibigay mo sa akin. Ayaw ma-read nito eh. Uy, huwag mo sabihin sa akin, nag-iisang kopya lang yan.
Tara na, Esperanza.
O babala sa planong dalhin sa malayo si Esperanza?
Ay, nakakasawa na yung si Elsa. Hindi ba siya pwedeng sumaya sa piling natin?
Siyempre naman pwede. Pero hindi dito sa bansa.
Mi Esperanza.
Tayo pag together, wala talo pag together. Let's stand together. Sa Net 25.
Welcome back, and we're still continuing with our news here on ASEAN in Focus. Now to breaking news first. Out of the U.S., at least 6 people killed, dozens more wounded in the country's latest mass shooting. It targeted an Independence Day parade in suburban Chicago. And more breaking news, the manhunt for the person of interest, Robert Crimo, 22 years old, is over. Police say the gunman fired from a rooftop into the crowd in Highland Park in Illinois. Let's listen in.
What I can tell you at this moment was approximately 15 minutes ago, the subject that we were looking for, the person of interest, Robert Crimo III, was spotted by a North Chicago unit at Buckley and 41, his vehicle, the vehicle that we were looking for. He attempted to initiate a traffic stop on that subject. That subject did flee. A brief pursuit went on. Ultimately, they were able to get the subject stopped at Wesley and 41 in Lake Forest. The subject was taken into custody without incident. Again, want to reiterate, things are moving very quickly, as they do, unfortunately, and we just want to keep you updated with the most relevant information. The person of interest is now being taken to the Highland Park Police Department, where we're going to begin the next phase of the investigation and speak with this person to make sure or see if, in fact, he is connected to this incident.
We were getting ready to march down the street, and then all of a sudden, waves of these people started running towards us. And right before that happened, we heard the pop, 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 pop. And I thought it was fireworks. Hard to understand what was going on at first because it sounded like fireworks, and this is the 4th of July. This is the day that we celebrate our country. This is also a day that our freedom got stolen from us because many of us residents here in this building, we're all locked down.
Heard what I thought at first was a car making multiple backfiring noises like they sometimes have at parades, an old-fashioned car. And then it kept on going and kept on going. And finally I heard the screams from a block down and people running and carrying their kids and everything. And we ran into the gas station, and we were in there for 3 hours in the BP gas station. So many squads like I've never seen in my life come, and so many ambulances at one time like I've never seen in my life for anything. And I've seen scenes like this over and over again on the TV in different communities and didn't think it was going to happen here ever. But it has, and I just feel so bad for the people that are deceased now and the people that are injured and in hospitals getting treated.
Firing into the holiday crowd, the shooter triggered scenes of total chaos as panic onlookers ran for their lives, leaving behind a parade route strewn with chairs, abandoned balloons, and personal belongings. Emergency officials said around 24 people, including children, were treated for gunshot injuries, with some in critical condition. President Biden said he and the First Lady are shocked by another senseless shooting in America, and he vowed to keep fighting the epidemic of gun violence sweeping the country. Last week, President Biden signed the first significant federal bill on gun safety in decades, just days after the Supreme Court ruled that Americans have a fundamental right to carry a handgun in public. In other news, Chinese authorities said 12 bodies have been found following a shipwreck in the South China Sea over the weekend that left more than 24 crew members missing. Take a look. The announcement came days after an engineering vessel 160 nautical miles southwest of Hong Kong suffered substantial damage and broke into 2 pieces during a typhoon. A total of 30 crew members abandoned the vessel, Fujing 001, used for offshore wind power construction, after its anchor chain broke in the typhoon, according to Chinese state media outlet CGTN. While Hong Kong's government flying service had pulled 3 people to safety on Saturday, hopes of any further survivors being found were fading after the service said on Sunday evening that the likelihood of that happening was very, very slim. Yet just hours later, southern China's Guangdong Maritime Search and Rescue Center announced it had rescued a 4th crew member who was described as being in a normal physical condition. Guangdong authorities also said they had found what are believed to be the remains of 12 other crew members and that the identities of the bodies were still being confirmed. Rescuers have expanded the scope of their search around the point of wreckage, with medical workers dispatched on each rescue ship to provide assistance to any crew member found as soon as possible, according to CCTV. Typhoon Chaba formed in the central part of the South China Sea and made landfall in southern China's Guangdong province on Saturday. The 3 survivors said that other crew members may have been swept away by waves before the first helicopter arrived. Rain-swollen rivers spilled mud-brown waters across swathes of Sydney, swamping homes and roads while forcing thousands to flee. Meanwhile, rescuers take a look are battling to airlift a 21 crew from a stranded cargo ship that lost power as torrential rains hit Australia's east coast on Monday. Australia has been at the sharp end of climate change, with droughts, deadly bushfires, bleaching events on the Great Barrier Reef, and floods becoming more common and intense as global weather patterns change. Higher temperatures mean the atmosphere holds more moisture, unleashing more rain. Emergency services have now instructed about 50,000 people to evacuate or to prepare to escape the rising waters in New South Wales, according to officials. Emergency workers carried out 22 flood rescues in Sydney overnight, with the support of 100 Army troops deployed to the state. The floods, heavy rain, and powerful winds led to power cuts for 19,000 homes. Meteorologists predicted the weather front would move northwards along the east coast after dumping rain on Sydney for 4 days. The federal government has declared a natural disaster in 23 flooded parts of New South Wales, unlocking relief payments to stricken residents. And extreme heat hitting Japan, with temperature records toppling, and Tokyo's rain season declared over at the earliest date on record. Dennis Liu has more.
Japan is trying to avert a looming power crunch as temperatures soar across the country. The mercury topped 35 degrees in Tokyo, and weather authorities are warning that scorching temperatures will persist over the next 2 weeks. Several heat stroke alerts are in place across Japan. Much of the country would normally be experiencing the rainy season at this time of the year. On Sunday, Isesaki City in Gunma Prefecture, north of Tokyo, logged the hottest temperature the country has ever seen in June, at 40.2 degrees Celsius. More than 250 people were taken to hospitals in the capital over the weekend after suffering heat stroke, according to the Mainichi Shimbun newspaper. Officials have been encouraging people to remove their masks when outside to prevent heat stroke, although many were still wearing face coverings in Tokyo. The government has also warned of power shortages as the country endures unusually intense heat waves.
もう少しそんなの前から分かってることだから、もう少し手を打っていってくれなくちゃ困りますよね。今こういう暑くなってから急にそんなこと言われたってね、みんなやれることは限られてるし。
やっぱり水分補給、ペットボトルの水だったりお茶を持ち歩いて、喉が渇いたって思う前に飲むようにして熱中症にならないようにしてます。
I think it's definitely an issue worldwide. I know a brother in Canada and they've had the rainiest June that they ever had, and I think worldwide people are worried about this whole climate change situation. What can be done, I don't know. I think people are tackling it country by country, and it probably has to be something that everyone tackles together, but words are easy and actions are difficult, so.
Households and businesses have been asked to turn off lights not in use and limit air conditioner use. Power supply is relatively tight after Japan idled most of its nuclear reactors after 2011 meltdowns in Fukushima. It also has been closing down old coal plants to meet promises for reducing carbon emissions. Japan also faces a potential shortage of fossil fuel imports amid sanctions against Russia over its invasion of Ukraine. Reporting from Tokyo, Japan, this is Dennis Liu. Back to you, Alma.
Residents living near Mount Canlaon should avoid getting near the 4-kilometer permanent danger zone as the volcano shows increased activity with possible phreatic eruptions. That is according to the Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology Director Renato Solidum Jr. At least 41 volcanic earthquakes caused by movements or eruptions of magma from the volcano were detected from 5 a.m. of June 30 to 2 p.m. of July 3. The figure included 7 very shallow tornillo signals that could be associated with volcanic gas movement, along with the fractures within the upper volcanic slopes. Tornillos are low-frequency earthquakes that produce a screw-like pattern on the seismograph. Pilots are also advised to avoid getting near the volcano summit as phreatic eruption can be hazardous to aircraft. Japan lodged a protest with China on Monday over a Chinese naval vessel sailing near disputed islands, according to a Japanese official, as reports emerged of Russia also sending its own Navy ship to the area. China's foreign ministry spokesman said in response that the Chinese vessel's activities are legitimate and legal, as the islands are China's inherent territory. Let's listen in.
钓鱼岛及其附属岛屿是中国的固有领土，中方舰艇在附近海域活动正当合法，日方无权说三道四。关于你提到。
Japan lodged a protest with China on Monday over a Chinese naval vessel sailing near disputed islands, according to the Japanese official. Reports emerge of Russia also sending its own Navy ship to the area. The islets in the East China Sea, known as the Senkaku by Tokyo and Diaoyu by Beijing, are at the center of a long-running dispute between Japan and China. Japanese officials regularly protest the presence of Chinese Coast Guard vessels in waters near the islands. But it's the first time since 2018 that a Navy ship has been spotted there, according to public broadcaster NHK. At around 7:44 a.m. on Monday, a Chinese Navy frigate was observed entering Japan's contiguous waters southwest of one of Tokyo-controlled islands, according to a statement from the Japanese Defense Ministry. Contiguous waters are a 12 nautical mile band that extends beyond territorial waters. The Office of the State President held a press conference on Monday to announce the state president's amnesty decision in 2022 in Vietnam. Addressing the event, Deputy Minister of Public Security Nguyen Van Long said inmates nominated for amnesty were reviewed case by case before submitting to the president for approval ahead of the upcoming National Day, or September 2, 2022. Amnesty will be granted to qualified prisoners through a strict, fair, and transparent process in accordance with the law. Amnesty is a major policy of the party and state, manifesting the fine tradition of the nation in strictly punishing lawbreakers while giving clemency and humanitarian treatment to prisoners who really rehabilitate themselves and wish to return to society as useful citizens. Under the 2007 law on amnesty, Vietnam has conducted 7 amnesties to free 87,000 inmates, including 3,035 last year, on the occasion of major public holidays and important events. Speaking at the press conference, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs Ha Kim Ngoc was quoted as saying that 751 foreigners are put in jail in Vietnam. Myanmar's military junta is responsible for shocking violence against children caught up in the bloody aftermath of last February's coup, according to a top independent Human Rights Council appointed investigator. 3 months since his last update to the UN Rights Forum in Geneva, Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Myanmar, Thomas Andrews, said that he'd met youngsters who'd fled the country after suffering irreparable harm. Take a look.
For 3 months since my last report to you, Myanmar has passed several grim milestones. More than 2,500 civilians have now been killed in the junta's bloody campaign against its opponents. Over 1 million people are now internally displaced. The number of arbitrarily detained political prisoners now exceeds 11,000. The junta has announced that executions will soon begin of political prisoners who have been put on death row. In the face of widespread public opposition to the junta, the military has trained its guns on growing numbers of villagers and other non-combatants. In northwest Myanmar, the military has accelerated a brutal campaign of arson and murder. Internet shutdowns imposed in the region make it difficult to document atrocities, which of course is the intention, the very intention of the military. These repeated attacks on civilians, as well as other grave human rights violations, constitute war crimes and crimes against humanity. At least 382 children have been killed or maimed. More than 1,400 children have been arbitrarily detained. I also report that 142 children have been tortured since the coup. 33,000 children could die of preventable deaths this year alone, merely because they have missed routine immunizations. 5 million children require urgent humanitarian assistance. Experts warn of a looming food crisis and the possibility of a dramatic increase in rates of childhood malnutrition and stunting. Physical and sexual abuse, the trafficking of children, and child labor are all on the rise. Girls are particularly vulnerable to forced marriage and sexual exploitation. The people of Myanmar continue to wait for the Security Council to even consider a resolution about Myanmar. Some members have failed to impose sanctions on the junta, even when they have done so in response to other crises. Member states who have adopted sanctions have too often failed to strategically coordinate these sanctions. Many have failed to target the junta's largest sources of revenue and their ability to move funds. ASEAN's 5-point consensus has failed to generate any tangible outcomes.
Back to Vietnam, Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh has asked for a faster pace of COVID-19 vaccine rollout following the detection of the subvariant BA.5 in Vietnam. Specifically, the government chief tasked the Ministry of Health to help localities speed up administration of COVID vaccines, especially the third and fourth shots, to people aged 12 and above, and the second dose to children aged between 5 and 11. The Omicron subvariant was first detected in South Africa in January, and it has become a common strain in several countries. Vietnam has recently detected the subvariant following genome sequencing, according to Dr. Phan Trong Lan, Director General of the Health Ministry's Department of Preventive Medicine, telling reporters last Monday. He also said that Omicron subvariant BA.2 still remains dominant in Vietnam. Back here in the country, Mayor Honey Lacuna Pangan will prioritize the health of Manila residents and will expand the programs of her predecessor, Francisco Isko Moreno Domagoso. At the inauguration of Manila's 12th City Council, Lacuna Pangan was also assured of support by Vice Mayor Yul Servo. Meanwhile, let's listen in.
Dahil ako'y isang doktora, mananatiling prioridad ng ating administrasyon ang mga programang pangkalusugan. Sa unang 100 araw natin ay panunungkulan ay sisikapin natin na lalo pang mapalakas ang kapasidad na makapaghatid ng dekalidad ng mga serbisyong alinsunod sa mga patnubay sa pagpapatupad ng Universal Health Care Act.
She also plans to build super health centers with the capability of conducting laboratory tests for indigent residents. She likewise asked the health cluster to be prepared in case of another surge of COVID cases. The monthly 500 peso pension for the elderly will continue, she assured, and said the Office of the Senior Citizens Affairs will build a bigger office and organize the list of senior citizens. Financial assistance for solo parents, persons with disabilities, and allowances for senior high school students and college students of pamantasan ng lungsod ng Maynila and Universidad de Manila will not be discontinued. The anti-illegal drugs campaign through the Manila Anti-Drug Abuse Council and Manila Police District will be intensified. Meanwhile, senior officials of ASEAN and the Republic of Korea renewed their commitment to further strengthen strategic partnership and broaden mutually beneficial cooperation at the 26th ASEAN ROC Dialogue held on July 1st. Both sides exchanged views on issues of common interest and concerns, including the South China Sea, the Korean Peninsula, developments in Myanmar, and the situation in Ukraine, with a view to promote peace, stability, and development in the region. The meeting welcomed the progress in the implementation of the ASEAN ROC Plan of Action 2021 to 2025. Several activities and projects have been carried out in various areas such as public health, environment and climate change, disaster management, education, culture, and youth exchanges. The meeting highlighted ASEAN and ROC's close cooperation in addressing the pandemic and ROC's contribution of $6 million to the COVID-19 ASEAN Response Fund. Both sides agreed to work closely to facilitate regional recovery through the implementation of ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework. And that is the latest news in the ASEAN region and beyond. We'll see you back tomorrow, same time, same place, here on ASEAN in Focus. I'm Alma Angeles. Thank you all for joining us. Have a good day.